HYPERCAR Mountain.
Hi, my name is Larry Hatch, and welcome to the first episode of HYPERCAR Mountain. This is a fantasy project to build a really great collection of supercars and hypercars and rare cars. But because I'm not a millionaire, I have to do it in 1/64 scale diecast versions. And these include anywhere from 50-cent finds at flea markets to $50 cars bought from overseas on eBay. So you're probably not a millionaire too, but if you love cars, this is a great way to indulge your fantasy in collecting everything. I think I have 57 Ferraris now, different Ferraris. So this is my way of indulging in car collecting without being a millionaire. It's fun. Let me know what you think. So, what really is a supercar? The answer depends on when you ask that question and whether a car is a supercar once and loses that status, or does it always have that status? The first use of the term supercar appeared in England in 1920 for a car called the Ensign 6. A car that's so rare that it's not even on Wikipedia, even with all their thousands of car listings. The Ensign 6 was a 6.7 liter high performance car that people compare today to the Bentley Speed 6. And it was expensive, it was fast. I can't tell you how fast because there's very little known about it. But that was the first use of that term. It was supposed to be the highlight of British technology at the time, along with the Bentley. The term supercar was really never used in the United States until about 1944, they tell us. There's a book published by the Research Institute of America that referred to supercars as a future automobile incorporating design and technology such as automatic transmissions and a flat floor plane. Very low standard for that. Basically, it meant anything futuristic or high-tech. And as probably most of you know, we in the United States prefer the term muscle car. We never really used the term supercar in the United States until maybe the 70s or 80s. The research is not clear on that, but probably the first car referred to in America as a supercar was the 1957 Rambler Rebel. And thanks to the Facebook page SUPERCARS for providing this history, although I've seen that article elsewhere. In the 1960s, the term supercar became even more widely used as people were trying to differentiate their muscle cars from a more of a meathead crude sense. And Pontiac GTO in American Car Life magazine in 1965, Pontiac GTO was referred to as a Hearst supercar. The term kind of degraded in the United States, and they would talk about budget supercars, or economy supercars, or compact supercars. Again, referring more to the technology than the performance of the car. Also in Europe, the term supercar was not widely used, especially in Italy, and they would often use, in Germany too, they would often use the term GT or GTO for their high-performance cars. So the term supercar is whatever you want it to be. Today, we generally think of a supercar as one having hundreds of horsepower, probably at least 500. Price doesn't matter. The Corvette Z06 and the new Corvette C8 are referred to as supercars, and they're not terribly expensive for the most part. Generally, a supercar is going to have performance, like I say, in hundreds of horsepower, probably a 0 to 60 in the 3 to 4 range or lower. It's going to be in the top 5 to 10% of cars in performance. It's going to be technically advanced, and it's going to have very high technology, the latest technology for the most part. Again, price is maybe not an issue. So, if we know what a supercar is, maybe, what then is a hypercar? Well, the term hypercar, it's hard to know when that originated. It was probably in the 90s, but the record is somewhat unclear on that. There's so many tens of thousands of publications, and nobody's just really searched them all, as far as I know, to determine the origin of that term. The term hypercar was necessary to distinguish a sports car from a supercar, from even the highest level. Like I said, a supercar is probably in the 5 to 10% highest performance of all models. But price maybe is not an issue. You can have some muscle cars that are supercars to some people, but they're not always very expensive. The hypercar is generally probably the 1%, the most extreme of all cars. To give you just a general example, a Ferrari 458 is a supercar. But a Ferrari Enzo and a LaFerrari, those are hypercars. A hypercar normally does have a price component. We often say they're over $1 million. Probably sometime in the near future, $1 million won't be that big a deal. But we don't call a Rolls Royce a hypercar generally, even though some of them are very fast. Same with a Bentley. Same with some Maseratis. Again, they're not over $1 million, but a lot of people would think of a Rolls Royce as a hypercar, the standard of the industry. But it's not really a sports car. So a hypercar needs to be expensive, let's say $1 million plus. Should have at least, in my opinion, 800 horsepower, probably 1,000 nowadays. And again, it should be very rare. So it should be expensive, say $1 million, very high horsepower, at least 800 to 1,000 maybe. And then it needs to be very rare, maybe a production of 20 to 100, let's say 20 to 200. Let's say 20 to 200, since some of these things are made up to 200 nowadays. And they need to be very, very rare, not something you could see in a showroom. Generally, hypercars are not something you're going to walk into a showroom, unless it's a very special showroom, and just purchase it. Somebody said hypercar is like pornography. It's hard to define, but you know it when you see it. Some people would say that besides the price, performance, and horsepower, a hypercar should be made out of carbon fiber. That's not always going to be the case, but that's sort of becoming the standard today. Generally speaking, a hypercar is also the top car at the time of a manufacturer, their most expensive car or set of cars. So that's why some people would tell you the Ferrari Enzo is not a hypercar anymore now that we have the LaFerrari and some of the others. So, you know, it's again a fluid thing, and it's up to you to define that. For my purposes, we're going to mix hypercars and supercars together and go from there. I do want to say really quickly that an exotic car is not the same as a supercar or hypercar. Exotic means from another place, from another country. So when I hear Americans talking about a Corvette being exotic, it's not. It's a domestic car. Ferrari is exotic if you're not in Italy. So please don't use the term exotic car for anything that's from your country. Doesn't really make sense. Thanks.
HYPERCAR Mountain.